Good morning. I was on mute, wasn't I? You didn't hear a word I said. I said, good morning. And I'm Julie Broadway, president of the American Horse Council, and we're delighted to have you with us for day 2 of our annual conference. If you missed day 1, which was our federal legislative and regulatory day, that was recorded and will be available for replay after the conference is over this week. But today is a new venture for us. This is our state legislative day. So first, a couple of logistics and a little bit of background to get us started, because we do have a few new people that have joined us for this session today. So I just wanted to remind you that the American Horse Council was formed in 1969 to serve as the voice of the equine industry in Washington, D.C. We are a bipartisan advocacy organization that seeks to address the social, economic, and legislative interests of the U.S. horse industry. As you are no doubt aware, our industry is very diverse and can at times be a little splintered on issues. So our goal here at the American Horse Council is to work on issues where we have consensus or we can coalesce around a solution. When the industry is totally split on an issue, to avoid any further divisiveness, we speak to all sides of that, but we remain neutral on that matter. So today we're really excited to have Amy Showalter of the Showalter Group with us, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then we have a state panel. So we've got 5 or 6 states represented, and we're going to hear some things that are going on in their area. We are using Zoom, and I think we've all gotten accustomed to Zoom, but just in case, we are going to use the chat feature, which is on your toolbar located probably on the bottom of your screen. And we're also going to use the raise your hand feature if you would like to be called on. Please be sure and mute so we eliminate background noise. And again, we're recording so you can hear the replay. We are going to make slides available afterwards, so don't worry about that. And with that, let me get to today. So, as I said, the American Horse Council primarily focuses on federal issues that affect the industry. However, we recognize that from time to time, state and local issues have the potential to gain momentum, spread across the country, or rise to the national level. So to that end, we keep our pulse on what's going on at the state and local level through our network of state horse councils and our other partner organizations and coalitions. Some recent examples of that include CAFO regulations in California, electronic logging devices, and the pursuit of those types of things in Oklahoma has been very strong. Independent contractor status in California, or professional certification laws that have popped up in a couple of states. So today we are just delighted to have Amy join us. And so just a little bit of background about Amy. I'm going to read part of her bio in case you didn't get around to that yet. So what do International Paper, Pet Partners, Southwest Airlines, Wendy's, and the National Restaurant Association all have in common? They have all used Amy for her expertise and her motivation to help elevate their government relations influence. She is a grassroots and PAC influence expert who founded the Showalter Group to help associations and corporations increase their grassroots and PAC effectiveness. Amy is the author of a book called The Underdog Edge: How Everyday People Change the Minds of the Powerful and Live to Tell About It. And that's what we're going to hear today, is about the underdog edge. She also wrote, which I can't wait to read, Amy, The Art and Science of the BFF, 105 Ways to Build Relationships on the Hill, at the State House, and in City Hall. Now, we can all benefit from 105 ways to do that. So that's super. She's sold over 15, almost 16,000 copies of this book, and she is very much sought after. And I'm just delighted to have her with us today. She is going to give us a lot of great tips about how we can leverage our relationships and make things happen for our industry. So Amy, take it away.
Thanks very much for having me join you today. In the next 45 minutes, hour or so, we are going to learn, I'm going to be sharing with you over 40 ways that you can increase your influence when you're influencing up the food chain. And you know, anytime we're talking to lawmakers at the state level, local, federal, we're the underdogs. No matter our title, no matter our organizational resources, we are the ones who have to influence up. They have something we want. They will make the decision as to whether we will get that or not. And so we are the ones who are the underdogs, fair or unfair in that situation. So, and a bonus for you in this, you'll hear me sometimes talk about how you can apply these things to your work or even personal relationships, maybe depending on your status in those. So this is a twofer today. So you'll be getting some bonus information. So we have a really jam-packed session for you today. So happy to answer questions in the chat room. And Julie, if I missed any of those, just interrupt me, bring them up. Raising the hand, we'll get to it here, definitely. So, this is a picture of the fabulous Randy and I, my husband, as I got started in the advocacy and political action committee world. And we look kind of normal, I guess, there, or he did. And he is in animal husbandry himself, in that he owns a very large pet resort here in Cincinnati, and that's two of our dogs. And we, we've noticed something is that, and you may notice this too, when you're in the world of advocacy and engagement on legislative issues, you find that you're always asking for things, right? You're asking lawmakers to vote with you. You're asking your colleagues, the members of your associations, to engage on these issues. You're asking them to perhaps give money to a political action committee. So we're always asking for stuff. And that can get exhausting. And it can get exhausting, it can be hard on your family as well, because, here's Randy moving along with his business in the dog world, and then all of a sudden he just takes a turn recently and goes to this, he just, goes all Lion King on me, or Tiger King, not Lion King, Tiger King on me. So I know he really did not. And I just have a friend that does excellent Photoshop work on that. But when we look at asking for things, that's influence. And I don't think influence is a bad thing at all. It gets a bad, has a bad connotation sometimes. But when you look at the definition of influence, it's an ethereal fluid held to flow from the stars and to affect the actions of humans, So it's a celestial occurrence. It's something where people don't realize that they're being cajoled or sold or told to do something, because influence is different from command and control. It is different from coercion. It is different from sometimes a typical supervisor-subordinate relationship to a degree. So that's what it is. And even big companies embrace the need to use underdog influence. This is a sign that was in Google's German offices, and it has some of their core values there. And I know you can't read all that, but I'll share with you what one of those core values is. It says, think and act like an underdog. Think and act like an underdog. Now, why would Google think that you need to behave like an underdog? Well, we know from Malcolm's writing on this, who he did actually respond to one of my emails as I was writing my book on this topic. So he's a very nice person. I will attest to that. He answers emails from people he doesn't know and so forth. So, but he in his book, he told people the possibilities relative to David versus Goliath battles, which I know we feel like we're in many times at local government levels. And as Julie said, the different state battles that tend to creep throughout the nation. So in his book, he's telling you it can be done. David can beat Goliath, and there are certain ways that can happen. And I'll touch on that. The difference in what I do in Underdog Edge is I teach people, how you do it, because there's a difference between winning underdogs and everybody else. All underdogs are not the same. How I came to this is that I'm hired by many groups to help them improve their advocacy effectiveness. And I noticed over the years that, gosh, some groups are really terrific at it. Their members are very astute. Their members tend to get what they want, tend to have good working relationships with elected officials, and hence are influential. Others who have almost more resources, who have some of the same opinion leaders and community leaders in their organizations, simply weren't as effective. So I thought, what's the difference here? I'm a little bit curious. I'm a bit of a research rat. And so I wanted to find out what are those nuances that make someone a successful underdog versus unsuccessful. So what I did was I decided to interview. I put a note out to my network and said, let me know of some people in your organization who have not just had great conversations with elected officials, but who actually changed the mind of an elected official or of someone more powerful than they are at work and in a social setting, something like this. So I'm looking for a really high bar, a high influence bar, not just did we have a good meeting, but did you change their mind? And how did that happen? So I talked to the underdogs, the ordinary, but they're actually quite extraordinary, the ordinary people, and you'll meet some of them today, the ordinary people who changed the minds of elected officials. And then I also talked to many of the elected officials whose minds were changed, because we know in influence that what one person attributes success to in that milieu, another person, the object of the influence, might say, well, it's something else. No, it wasn't that. It was this reason they were successful. So we have to look at both of those factors in the influence dynamic, the influencer and the influenced, and see, what's common here. So, what do they have in common? And I had some great conversations, and I had some ideas in my mind as to what I thought would emerge as the top patterns, but I was surprised by many. And we have, as a result, over 7 principles of upward influence and over 55, I think, tactics. Now, we're not sharing all 55 with you. I'm going to get to about 40 today. So we're going to go fast. And I'm going to be talking in some broader terms as well. So you'll get lots of content here. And there are lots of things. And I'm not saying you have to do all 55 things correctly to win over someone. But we have to realize that not all underdogs are equal. They're not all the same. We don't view them all. Just because someone has underdog status doesn't mean we always like them, and so forth. So there's a path. There's definitely a path, to success. I love this quote by James Rogers: "Over every mountain there's a path, although it may not be seen from the valley." Right? Although it may not be seen from the valley. So we find there's a path there at the Grand Teton, which is what that picture. There's actually a path up there. There's a trail, a trail to the top, and something Randy did. I did not do. I picked him up when he was done over the 2-day jump. So, but he had some fun with that. So we know that why does it work? Why does it matter? Well, when you look at these, see this get more admirable. You look at these examples of underdogs. We all, Phil Mickelson, an underdog now, right? Contextually. If you and I were playing golf with Phil Mickelson, no, we're the underdog. In that setting, he's an underdog. So in these settings, we always tend to view underdogs as extremely positively. We view them as working harder than other people. And we view them as being more warm, more likable, having more grit than other people. And you can see that in movies and so forth, there's not, when have you seen a movie made of the big corporation or the big entity that's successful? When do you see that? I bet you don't see that very often. I know I don't. We see the little guy, the little person, making the progress, right? And even in this case, this movie Spotlight, you have the Boston Globe, big media company, obviously not an underdog in those situations, but against the Roman Catholic Church when they were exposing the sex abuse scandal there by priests, yes, they're the underdog. So, and we find that underdogs do things differently. And of course, our most famous underdogs using many different tactics than traditional warfare at the time was the folks in the American Revolution. So we always view underdogs in a pretty positive light. Dr. Joseph Bandello said this about it. He said, people who are powerful and wealthy have a better sense of the just world theory than those who aren't in high-level positions. It gives them the opportunity to say, look, we help people, we aren't the bad guys. Social science indicates that people have a general aversion to inequality. They want to correct it. Helping the underdog is one way to correct it. Further, because underdogs have a lot of heart and grit, we see them as good and moral people. Therefore, it makes us feel more moral to help other moral people. So a lot of times reading about the underdog is all about us. And that's okay. That's okay. But it's really something embedded, I believe, in our DNA. And we view them differently. Therefore, if we're rooting for them, we are better people ourselves because they are really good people as well. Okay. So these were this is the canon of successful underdog influence after all these interviews and looking at the patterns of responses. As I said, I conducted in-person and phone interviews. with individuals. I did not have any kind of survey with multiple choice pre-populated answers. So this was very organic. And so I'm taking their input and then looking at, what are the commonalities? And these are the main bins of underdog influence. And then these are the 7 principles. And then we have our tactics within each of these. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about street cred. These are some of the principles of street cred. Okay, shortcuts used by powerful people. And you think, well, Amy, no, I think people just are judged on their merit, their past track record and so forth. Well, a little bit, but human minds, as my colleague, Dr. Rhodes, who contributed terrifically to the book, said, there's a bias efficiency that we all have in life. We're cognitive misers. We don't really like to have to think a lot. I mean, just look at a lot of decisions made today, my friends. People don't like to have to think. Okay, so we know that the bias efficiency is prevalent. We make judgments based on past experiences and past behaviors. And powerful people are generally busier than other people. They generally have a lot more demands on their time. Therefore, they use this more than average people because they're less reflective than other people. Okay, that's an important point, knowing that, and think about that. Think about any elected official you've ever interacted with. Are they just lounging around with nothing else to do? And no, they're being interrupted constantly when you're meeting with them, or they're taking other phone calls, or their staff's coming in. And so they're making really quick decisions. All right, so we'll talk about these 3 things real quickly here. David Funder, professor of psychology at UC Riverside, said snap judgments are reliable judgments, especially for those who spend a lot of time with other people. Well, what do elected officials do? Spend a lot of time with other people on the campaign trail. That's all they do. So they are really good at that. Former Congressman Jim Ross Lightfoot said, we listen to a lot of people. We're pretty good at reading behavior and telling whether someone is honest or not, And these were, I won't read you the comments in this next slide, but these were some comments that the elected officials whose minds were changed said to me during my conversations with them. I'd say, tell me about the person who changed your mind, set the scene for me. And as you look at these statements, you can see that they are looking at the past as prologue. And I always say, where you are is who you were. You have to watch your reputation. I had heard she had a good reputation in the community. I knew her husband. He was a nice guy, well respected in the business world. I didn't know her, but I was very aware of her organization. That's really important. What does that mean? Your organization speaks before you do many times. The brand, the legislative brand, the marketplace brand, the ethical brand of your organization speaks before we do as advocates many times. Okay, so we have to always be aware of that. Now, what I have so much fun with in Underdog Edge, and I was rereading some passages the other day, and I was like, I really like this book, is that we combine a lot of the social science research to back up what I found. Okay, so to my summary to back that up. So this is some research with, and this is not anything about HR representatives or anyone who does human resources in your organization. I've had audience members ask me that before. Amy, what does this mean about HR people? So take that out of your mind. What this means is Dr. Frank Verneri, when he was at Oregon State, did research with to determine first impressions that individuals have of others who were of job applicants. He had student interviewers, college students who were not trained in interviewing or HR tactics, interview real job applicants for about 10 minutes each. And then he had them assess them relative to their capabilities, their warmth, their competence, and so forth. He then had trained HR interviewers interview the same individuals for the same amount of time. And the results in terms of their analysis and assessment of these people were the same. Even though the HR folks presumably asked different questions, much more advanced questions, to get at the heart of somebody and to read between the lines on someone. But guess what? their impressions from untrained college students who are probably getting paid $5 an hour or $10 an hour to help with this research, their impressions were the same. So we find that it's, again, no commentary on HR folks, but there's something very real to those first impressions. So we have to monitor that. We have to really watch that. If there's something you want to accomplish 5 years from now, be careful who you are right now, because it will make a difference. It will make a difference. It will get around. So, and lawmakers know this. mean, lawmakers know they're checking it out, or they're having their staff check it out. And you saw from those other very organic comments that that's something on their mind. Also, we notice that you can't call yourself the underdog. You can't play the victim. Doesn't go over well with people. Jim Ross Lightfoot said, people play by the rules, work hard, they go to the top of my list. State Representative Jane Gale Boyd from Florida said a woman had exhausted other resources. She could have taken government assistance and refused it. I was her last resort. Representative Boyd worked with a woman whose husband was a guard in the Florida penal system. He passed away a day before he retired. They wouldn't give him his pension. They wouldn't give his beneficiaries his pension because he died 24 hours before it would have taken effect. So she approached many legislators for help. Jane Gale Boyd helped her on that. But it was something where she made it clear she had a disabled daughter. She had other opportunities to get public support. She didn't want it. That was appealing to Jane Gale Boyd. Would it be appealing to all lawmakers? I don't know. But we do know that when you are, in this setting, you can't call yourself the underdog. And actually, and believe it or not, there is research on this. We'll go over all these, but this is your extra credit for today. If you want to be scientifically proven card-carrying underdog, this is what you've got to demonstrate. And some of this is from my work and Malcolm's as well. He focuses a lot on not using the same tactics as the big dogs. Now, both of these people were underdogs in their races. Barack Obama in 2008, Donald Trump, in 2012. So yeah, or no, 2016, kind of time flies. But they both used different tactics, did they not? Very different tactics than traditional politics at the time. Obama's use of really perfecting the use of social media and the internet and subject lines and emails and so forth to raise money, a very different approach there. And of course, Trump's legendary use of Twitter and so forth. It never was used in the way that he used it. So these are some things we have to be aware of. You cannot, if you're fighting a local initiative, but you can't do the same thing always that your opponents are doing. You can't always, don't try not to be a copycat in all these situations. Okay, so our next canon, so we got to have street cred. There's a lot more on street cred, but that's all we have time for now. Let's talk about keeping your eyes up. Keeping your eyes up, meaning keeping your eyes up into the big dog's world. How do they look at life? What are their values? Because it's about them, not us. It's about them, not us. Now, one of the things we hear quite frequently is just be passionate and you'll win. You got to be passionate. You got to show passion for what you're doing, right? I mean, but this is passion too. I mean, these views, these images are passion as well. I love that woman on the left. I mean, I love that face. So we're told a lot to be passionate. And what I found was this. I would interview lawmakers and I would say, tell me about someone who changed your mind, and they'd start telling me about the individual. And inevitably in the conversation, they would say things like, well, Amy, this person was really convicted about what they were saying, and they were quite passionate about their cause. And I felt they were very sincere. And so, okay, so I'm taking notes. Fast forward 45 minutes later in the conversation, as I'm wrapping up, I said, well, is there anything that we need to know that will cause these interactions to go off course, to veer off the road, and that's just going to negate any progress you made? And they said, and I'm not making this up, it's when these people get so passionate and they really can't control their emotions. And it's when they're kind of fist pounding on the desk and they're a little self-righteous sometimes. And so being over passionate is really a problem. And I'm thinking, you just said it was good, and now you're telling me it's bad. What is it here? What are we talking about? So I did a little bit of research, and I was looking through my notes. And as I reminded my colleagues, we were talking about this, I said, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I kill at pattern detection. I can detect patterns better than anybody. I can diagnose better than a lot of people out there. And I've actually been tested on that, so I can. But nevertheless, what I found in the diagnosis and the pattern was that passion works under two conditions. Passion works in two situations when you're influencing up. Remember, my friends, we're talking about upward influence, not influencing your subordinates, not influencing your peers, not leading a team. We are talking about you're the underdog. And underdog influence has nuances to it. That's why when you see those persuasion books out there that say top 10 ways to get anybody to say yes, they don't work. That's why there's still a market for it, because it's very contextual, and it's very influence is very positional in terms of where you are in a hierarchy, and the value system you have and the value system of your prospect. So a lot of these cut and paste one size fits all solutions simply do not work, but there'll always be a market for them. So good for them. But we find that passion can destroy some things, and when you're influencing up. And here's some research, Rigetti and Finkelhauer's research said that people are able to detect the temporary depletion of self-control. This perception of depletion influences the amount of trust in the person. Those associations held when controlling for liking of the individual, the closeness they are, how tired they were, and the participant's mood. So we know that trust is decreased when you're overly passionate when influencing up. And I'd say in their research, probably influencing in many instances. Because trust is a big motivator of persuasion. It's a big motivator of liking. It's the one thing, if I trust somebody, I'm just more likely to allow them to influence me. So we have to remember that, passion can be really, really dangerous. But I did find 2 instances, as I said, as I promised earlier, when it does work. I looked back at all my notes and I thought, here's the pattern. When you're giving them hero status or new friends is when it can work. You say, what do you mean by hero status, Showalter? Well, what I mean is that you are able to make them feel like they're on the side of the angels. Remember what Jane Gale Boyd said? She said, I felt like I was her last resort. My friend Leslie Waters, who's now a mayor of a small town in Florida, was a state representative in Florida. And she had a woman approach her on a child safety issue, Janet Gorley. And Janet Gorley's granddaughter had died of shaken baby syndrome. Janet wanted someone to help her create more materials for expectant moms and dads on shaken baby syndrome. Some PSA announcements, these kinds of things, in addition to what hospitals were already doing. She approached the State Pediatric Society. They said, we're not interested. She approached the State Medical Society. They said, we're not interested. She approached various child advocacy groups. They said, we're not interested. She approached health insurance organizations and health insurance companies. They said, we're not interested. Leslie was her state representative. She approached Leslie, and Leslie thought, I don't really do a lot. And she said, Amy, I don't do a lot in children's issues. I'm a business legislator. I got voted as one of the top business legislators in Florida. Why would I want to get involved in, I'm not against children's issues, but why would I want to really take that and champion that cause? But she saw that Janet Gorley was a fighter. She wasn't trying to be a victim. She said, Janet had a lot of expertise on this issue. She was a special guest speaker in many of the schools about how to recognize predators, sexual predators. So she had a lot of credibility on child safety issues and child advocacy issues. And I just really felt for her. And so I took it on because I just felt like, nobody else would help her. Fast forward, they get resources, budget allocation for billboards and more resources for expectant moms and dads relative to preventing shaken baby syndrome. And Leslie said afterwards, she said, it was an easy decision to help her, but the work was hard. She said, but now I have all these friends. She said, now all these child advocacy folks come to my fundraisers, they glom onto me at meetings, wherever I am, they're there. And boy, that's really valuable to me because, I didn't really have a lot of access to those kinds of people. I was with the business community. So you see the example of that story. Janet gave Leslie hero status. She also helped her make new friends. She helped her gain a new constituency by saying yes. So Janet's passion worked in her favor because she could provide those 2 benefits. Can you, ask yourself, can you provide those benefits? If you can, passion can work for you. You can be as passionate as you want. If not, tone it down, pump the brakes, tone it down, watch your passion. So I wish I could say it was an easy push button way and, do these 5 things and it'll work every time, but the devil's in the details when it comes to true influence. Another thing we have to know when we keep our eyes up. So passion only works in certain situations. Number 2, we have to know the sacred values and taboo trade-offs of our influence target, Colleen Barrett, who's president emeritus at Southwest, told me the story of the creation of the airline show. It was a reality show that featured Southwest that was on A&E for many years. She said, Amy, I was completely against that show. I had this marketing manager that came to me and said, oh gosh, I've got this idea. It's going to change the world. It's going to change everything. And she said, everything this marketing manager told me was going to change the world. That's how she started every conversation. So I was a little suspect. Some of her ideas worked, some didn't, but I wasn't crazy about this for several reasons. I knew that if we had a reality show, what was going to happen is that they were going to focus on certain customers. They were going to focus on certain employees. And I didn't want that because we are very egalitarian as much as we can be. I don't like favorites being played, in the workforce and in this environment. And I knew that the camera guys and producers would do that. And I just didn't want to go for that. I knew they'd feature customers that had drank too much and so forth. And I didn't want to go there either. So the marketing manager came back and framed this in a different way. And she framed it in terms of the free advertising that this represents, and did the hard number crunching as to how much money Southwest what this TV show would do versus paid advertising for the show. Now, one of the sacred values of Southwest, if any of you know them pretty well, like I do, is that they are very frugal. They're very frugal, and they like to keep costs low. They like to maximize their dollars. So that was the sacred value that allowed the door to open, that allowed that show to proceed. But as Colleen told me, she said, Amy, I've never watched it. I will never watch it. She said, I have my assistant watch it and take notes, and I read the notes because I cannot bear to set eyes on that. So she did let it go forward for a while. But we have to know those sacred values. And taboo trade-offs are simply things that you can look historically, and that's the beauty of all the online tools nowadays. You can really do a nice research on folks to find out what are some things they're adamantly against in their life in terms of their value system, and what they're for, and what they fight, and what they won't budge on. And it's important to know those things, because taboo trade-offs are things that that person feels violated and really can't live with themselves if they violate those beliefs. So this marketing manager was effective because she appealed to Colleen and the company's sacred values. Now, if you want to engage in a super turbocharged Eyes Up, you want to help elected officials. And I talk about this later when I talk about being nice, but we know that elected officials sometimes get themselves in quandaries and need help. And this is John Boyd, who's head of the National Black Farmers Association. John Boyd would conduct protests like this in the Virginia legislature by taking his combine, his tractors up near the State House and going around the block and so forth. And at the time, the governor of the state, George Allen, said, I viewed you as that crazy protester and so forth. However, he viewed John differently when he made a mistake and used a racial epithet at one of his campaign appearances. Some of you may remember this. And at that time, George Allen was running for president. He was caught on videotape using a negative racial slur that was caught on tape, put everywhere. He drops out of the presidential primary race. John knew that that was a bad thing, but John knew that he needed help. And see, John this whole time was trying to get some changes made to Virginia law and nationally as well regarding a form of reparations for Black farmers who were discriminated against in the Department of Agriculture's loan program in the 50s and 60s. And that eventually did come to fruition. But he said, I knew Senator Allen had, as a result of that campaign video, a problem with minority communities. I knew he needed help, and I needed his help. He told me he remembered me as that crazy protester from his days as Virginia governor. He changed when I told him I could help him with the minority community. So John did some outreach for him and helped repair some of those relationships. And then John was back in the news when Virginia Governor Ralph Northam had a kerfluffle with some yearbook pictures. And he met with him, tried to, conducted outreach, spoke out on his behalf as well. Now, is John Boyd of one political persuasion and helps people in that party? Yes, but you can do that too, regardless of what party you're in. I mean, what he's doing is he's looking for opportunities to help. So that's this is high level Eyes Up. Okay, this is high level Eyes Up. Ask yourself, how can I help an elected official who needs my help? how can I help them? Because you are of value when you can help them reach someone they can't. Okay. All right, next, grit. I could talk for an hour about this. I'd love to talk for an hour about it. It's so important. But this is a list of a few of my underdogs and how long it took them to change the mind of the individual that they wanted to persuade. So, we've got a lot there. Got a lot. Okay, I think, Brad Neat, only 1 year for him. So he sets the record of 1 year, and he's with the hospital in Wisconsin, which I'll get to later. But really required reading for you, Angela Duckworth's work on grit. I had noticed through, how long it took these people to succeed. And I thought, well, what does that take? Perseverance, what's another word for it? Grit. So I'm researching grit, and her research found, based on her work as a Harvard alumni, she went to a reunion of her Harvard compatriots, and she found out that some of them were wildly successful and some weren't, believe it or not. And the ones that weren't tended to be dilettantes in different areas of their lives. And while that's okay to explore what you want to do and change chapters of your story and so forth, she found that the ones who stayed at it tended to have some factors in their life that made sense as to why they were staying at it. And as a matter of fact, her grit test is so predictive of success in the military academies that West Point uses it now, because it's a higher predictor as to whether a recruit will stay for the full 4 years than SAT scores, physical fitness tests, extracurricular activities in high school, those kinds of things. So very, very predictive, and more important than grades and so forth. So we know that our successful underdogs stay at it for a long time. And to get grit, you need these 3 things. I'm sorry, but you need adversity in your life. People who've had it cushy tend to not have a ton of grit. Okay, so when pushed. So I don't wish adversity on anyone, but we know that adversity produces grit, particularly if you have a lack of excessive rumination about the grit. The less you kind of think about it and chew on it and digest, and really overanalyze it. And researchers tell us that women do this more than men. They tend to overanalyze a lot more. That leads to more clinical depression. Again, I'm just the messenger, okay? I'm not casting aspersions, I'm just telling you, okay? We know that industrial strength grit comes from adversity and also loss in your life. And it can be the loss of jobs, it can be loss of loved ones, obviously. Marvin Eisenstadt's research found that super high achievers, in the United States at least, tend to have something in common with juvenile delinquents. And what they have in common is most have lost a parent before the age of 21. I'm talking super high achievers. Jim Collins, author of Good to Great, on a world scale, Lennon and McCartney both lost their mothers at early ages. You can go on and on. The list is endless. And it's interesting when I hear or read about someone who is a super achiever, I'd say 80% of the time, there's some kind of loss of a parental figure at an early age. So it's fascinating. We don't wish this on anyone, but we know, but it can be other types of loss as well. So that adversity and the loss gives you a lot more grit. Grit is good for advocacy. And what does this mean too? It means the older you are, you probably got more grit. The older you are, the less fearful you are, you probably have more grit. Kate Hanai, who is the founder of flyersrights.org, said this: my skills being unstoppable. Most people would give up. Not me. I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life. I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And she's the one who is responsible for the law that does not allow airlines to keep you on the tarmac for more than 3 hours. Well, they can, but then they have to pay a very large fine of, I think it's $27,000 per passenger if they keep you on the tarmac for more than an hour or more than 3 hours. All right. So she was the one that made that happen and founded that organization. The wonderful Karen Kellogg said, many times I thought I'm one person, I might as well give up. Don't think that way. Do a little bit at a time. Do the critical inch each day. If you keep the patient in mind and at the forefront of everything you do, you can't go wrong. I was willing to die in that ditch. Now, she's in healthcare. Her patients were cancer patients who she was giving drugs to them, giving them, installing their ports and giving them chemotherapy in the doctor's office. The DEA did not like that. That was technically a violation of law. She had DEA agents at her practice with guns drawn and so forth to arrest her and others for that. She was able, with others, to get a law changed in Utah to allow her to, and others, to administer those drugs in that way. And one of the people that whose minds was changed was a legislator who was also a pharmacist, who would have wanted supposedly the other, only people to get drugs from, the pharmacy and do it in a certain way. And, so here we have big flipping of an influence target there. All right, so you got to have grit. Next, you got to build your pack. There are, and so it's a team effort. It's a team effort. And I would say that one thing I found, the pattern we found, was that there are three really important aspects of a team. Not all teams are equal. Not all underdog teams are the same. You've got to have a cohesive team leader. Dr. Robin Boucher said this: minority opinions, and when I say minority opinions, I mean minority opinion, not minority groups, not ethnicity minorities, okay? Minority opinions survive within society in clusters of like-minded people that are usually formed around strong individuals. Weak individuals are more likely to adhere to society's majority opinion than strong individuals. So people in the minority groups are more likely to be stronger on average than society's majority members. Think about that. You wonder why certain laws get enacted? You think, well, I don't think that way. How are these things happening? It's because people with minority opinion don't follow the grain as much, and they tend to have a stronger, personality. They may have more grit. I don't know. I haven't studied that totally, but he studies group, spreading of ideas and group influence. It's terrific stuff. Dr. Jim Mueller, head of Voice of the Faithful, which addressed a lot of the abuse in the Catholic Church. Also a Harvard cardiologist. Also founded a group called International Physicians Against Nuclear War. He won a Nobel Prize for that. People kind of giggled and snickered when he formed that group. But he's kind of a quiet storm, very quiet guy. Attended a meeting at the church in Wellesley, Massachusetts, in the basement there of one of the churches, to talk with the congregation about how to address the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. And he came home and he said, I'm going to lead this group. I'm going to lead this group. We're going to call it Voice of the Faithful. And his wife said, "You are crazy. I cannot believe you're going to do this." And he said, "Well, you told me I had to get involved. I had to take on the church." And she said, "I meant St. John's Church in Wellesley, Massachusetts, not the Roman Catholic Church, not the Roman Catholic Church." So he took it on, though, and really kept the group focused on that issue when it wanted to splinter off into different areas of tithing, women in the priesthood, and so forth. He kept them focused on that particular issue. Okay. Then we had connected PAC members, people who joined him. Mary Jo Bain, connected because she was an authority on the issues of church and society, and a professor at Harvard, and written a lot on this topic, and how priests and pastors should treat their congregations and that interaction. So she was connected, in terms of her credibility. Peter Pollard, a victim of priest sexual abuse when he was young, reframed the issue in terms of it's sexual abuse, but it's also abuse of power. And when it became to abuse of power, then we had lots of even more people were engaged in that issue. And Thomas O'Malley, very connected because he was a state attorney general who was willing to bring charges against these violators. So these people are connected in different ways. And Mary Jo Bain connected to the academic community, major credibility in the media. Peter Pollard, very sympathetic victim, credible in the media, connected to the media, connected to other survivors. And then, of course, Thomas O'Malley. So you have to have people. There's many other stories I could share with you from Underdog Edge, but this is the most salient. But you've got to have people who are connected to some decision makers and can bring strengths to the group. Okay, that's got to be a part of what you do. Got to have convert PAC members. Back to Kate Hanni. This is something never would have come up on my own. I wouldn't have thought about this, but you've got to have people on your team that used to be on the other side who can say, I used to believe this, and now I'm with this team. Now I believe this. She was able to get a gentleman by the name of Kevin Mitchell, who is still as head of the Business Travelers Coalition. And when she wanted these laws passed relative to tarmac time for passengers, he felt like, hey, this is a customer service issue. This is not something that the government needs to regulate. It's individual to each airline and so forth. However, she very adroitly reframed the issue in terms of safety, noting that on any aircraft at any one time, 30% of the people are either infants, elderly, or have some chronic medical condition of some kind. So you've got 30% of your people that can't sit there for 3 hours, okay, without being allowed to deplane. And he said when she reframed it in terms of safety, then I knew we had to switch. And Kate said, when I would go to different hearings and he would testify against us, he was the smartest person there. He was so good, and I knew I had to get him on my side. So she really strategically went about to, how do I get him? How do I make him on my team? So really a great example in so many ways of just tenacity and strategic recruitment of a really important person. So who is a convert? Who's a convert that you can get as a member of your coalition? Maybe an organization that used to be on another side, or maybe even apathetic to your issue. Can you get them on your team as a member of a coalition? I'd start there and then think, are there individuals who are influential that are converts that I can get on my team? You will add jet fuel to your influence if you can get converts on board. And we see this in the tech world today with Robert McNamee and that's Sean Parker on the right, who helped found Facebook and different big investors in different social media networks, who now started a coalition about the dangers of tech for children particularly. And so they're getting attention because of that. Next, we need to be vivid. Now, by vivid, I don't mean that it's about protesting all the time, even though that makes a difference to, puts things on our radar, obviously. What I mean is proximity power. Location, location, location. Not one of the individuals who changed the mind of someone up the food chain from them did it via remote influence tactics. I'm not saying jettison your emails and jettison your social media posts and so forth, but those aren't the things that change the mind. Generally, it's more than generally, it is the proximity, the face-to-face engagement that moves the lever, that tips the point. Why is it the gold standard? I won't read all these to you. This is your list here of why face-to-face is the gold standard, actually a platinum standard. I think number 6 is the most important, particularly in today's world. It demonstrates you're willing to make the effort. It demonstrates sincerity. It demonstrates intensity of feeling. It demonstrates grit. So we know that everyone is crunched for time. Everyone's crunched for time. So to the extent that you can show, and your group can show, hey, we're willing to show up in person. Now, I know that's been difficult recently, but that's going to change. We're going to have a hybrid situation here. So how will you get back to face-to-face? What ratio will you do face-to-face versus virtual? You really have to think about that. You really want to think about that. Carolyn Dennis is a woman who did this quite adroitly as well. Now, by vivid, I mean vivid in person. I also mean vivid examples. She was able to change the mind of Kentucky Representative Jimmy Higdon, which I will share with you a little bit more about him later, on an issue relative to regulating the types of soft drinks that could be sold in schools, in the vending areas in schools. And he was adamantly against it. He was a member of the Kentucky Grocers Association. He didn't think, he thought parents needed to be taking care of that, not the schools, until Carolyn went in with a bag of sugar, a Ziploc bag of sugar that had, I think it was 18 teaspoons or tablespoons of sugar that represents what's in one Mountain Dew. And Mountain Dew is the official drink of Kentucky, at least it was at the time that we were writing this. So official drink of young males in Kentucky. All right, I know that for a fact. So, he said, boy, when I saw that, I realized, oh, this is really over the top. I've got to rethink this. And there's some other things she did that I'll share momentarily. So you also have to be nice. Now, nice doesn't mean saying please and thank you to the big dogs, because they would say to me when they talked about the characteristics of these individuals, they would say things like, well, and they were really nice. And I would say, well, what do you mean by that? And they would say, well, they were always smiling, or they had solutions for me. They really helped me in my next election campaign. They were very interested in my life before politics. It was fascinating what they thought nice meant. It was really interesting. So we found some patterns there. And when it talks about looking nice to be nice, believe it or not, and Jimmy Higdon said this about Carolyn, he said, I adamantly disagreed with her, but she was classy. She always came in with a smile. She was nice. This is on the top left there. That's Houdini, my dog, one of my smiling dogs. He's gone to the kennel in the sky. I have a dog now that truly smiles and shows his upper teeth now, Finnegan. But anyways, we know that a genuine, authentic smile, if you can do that and it's genuine, it's authentic looking, You definitely will be perceived as nice. We like to say yes to nice people. We give them the benefit of the doubt. We give them goodwill. We listen to them. This was Professor Ryo Oda of the Nagoya Institute of Technology did research on this, where he found that people rated themselves as either an altruist or an egoist, egoist being selfish, altruist being unselfish. They self-rated themselves. Then he videotapes them in conversation with other individuals. He sent those videotapes to people 800 miles away, to college students 800 miles away, and had them rate those individuals in the videos as to whether they were nice or not nice, whether they were an egoist or an altruist. What did he find? The ratings were identical. The people that rated themselves said, yeah, I'm an egoist, I'm kind of selfish. They were rated that way in the video by people that didn't know them, just by seeing their visage, their face. Okay. The people that were rated themselves as altruistic and nice were rated as altruistic and nice by people that did not know them when they saw them. We judge books by their cover, my friends. We judge books by their cover, and you know what? We're right about 95% of the time. We're right about 95% of the time, particularly if you spend time with other people. If you're not spending time with other people, it's going to be tough for you. But if you are spending time with other people, you're going to be pretty accurate. So you got to just be pleasant, okay? Here's his quote. She was a classy lady, even though I was adamantly against what she was doing. She always had a smile on her face when she saw me in the hall or stopped by my office to talk to me. I had a great deal of respect for her. I had a great deal of respect for Carolyn Dennis. Carry good news, okay? Not like this church. So I love church signs because they're so funny. And we have all these bad news things here on this sign, but then on Sunday the sermon is America's joyous future despite all these problems. So carry good news, bring solutions to your big dog. Don't just complain about things, right? I mean, I know that when we talk to elected officials, there's usually a problem. I get that, but what's the solution? How can you provide a solution? How can you say I'm working on the solution? Okay. Be nice by doing favors, fair or unfair. And favors are different depending on who you're talking to, but seek ways to help, like you saw with John Boyd or other ways. How can I help them? How can I help them? And in the book that Julie referred to, I have some ways in there that you can do that. You have to respect their path. You can't denigrate their previous life, their profession or lack of one, and so forth. I had one lawmaker say to me, Amy, I had this group come and talk to me, and they were so proud of the fact that they hadn't sued my company that I used to work at for 25 years. And they thought that was funny when they met me and said, oh, I haven't had a privilege to sue Allstate Insurance before. She thought, is this the best you got to send somebody like this to talk to me? So respect the path, spread the word, tell people when your elected officials do a good thing. One of my favorite stories is from the wonderful Rennie Molino, an insurance agent in Columbus, Ohio, who his job was to convince a trial lawyer who was also a state representative of the merits of malpractice reform and so forth. So that was a tough sell. She was a Republican, but she was a trial attorney. So it was very interesting. And she had kind of this dichotomy in her belief system, but he said to her, look, I've told you everything I can tell you. This issue is so important to insurance premiums. My customers are hurting, but I have 400 really good high level customers. And if you can help us on this, I will make sure they know in some way, shape or form what you've done. Okay. And she said, it's 400 people I wouldn't have access to otherwise. Okay. Now, there were other reasons why she said yes, but that was something that really made a difference for her and, factored into her decision making. And he sent a letter, and, today you might do this on Facebook or whatever. Sometimes it's better to put it, in a different format, but just not endorsing her on behalf of his company, but just saying that, legislative issues affect your premiums. You might be of interest to know that Amy Salerno was able to she was very supportive on lawsuit abuse reform. And you need to know that when you go to the voting booth. So just kind of gentle, nice, soft, not a hard sell, but spreading the word. Okay, spreading the word. I love what Joel Wood, lobbyist with the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, said about being nice. He said, there's always a debate on how aggressive you should be versus being nice. I read the political needs and personal objectives of the person I'm trying to persuade. You have to read people. Bottom line, the foot you step on today is connected to the ass you will have to kiss tomorrow. Yes, they are connected. They are connected. Okay. Last thing, I won't go over this in too much detail, but let's talk about courtship before marriage. This is building the relationship. I feel so strongly about it. As Julie said, I wrote a guidebook on it because we find that particularly in today's world of hyperabundant content and noise, I believe that legislators are actually winnowing access. They're actually dealing less with the broader public and dealing more with people they know and trust when it comes to making those important decisions. So we know that you have to be seen often, fair or unfair. You can't just develop that relationship when you need something. All right. You have to be around lots of times. Bob Boniface, owner of a small alarm company, who changed the mind of a major legislator in Congress, said, you know, you have to become known, become their friend, because they don't want to make their friends mad. You can't just come in when you have a problem. You can't just come in when you have a problem. Brad Neat said, legislators can see if your approach isn't authentic. You have to have fun. I'm more concerned about the viability of the long-term relationship than the outcome of each and every conversation. And that's him in the center there. And he flipped two Democrat legislators, flipped them to vote for lawsuit abuse reform. And normally that doesn't happen. So he really did quite a feat there. And Patty Ann Moskwa said this, owner of the Yankee Rebel Tavern in Mackinac Island. She said, you don't go to a legislator's office and just start asking things. So she has lobbied consistently for greater funding for travel and tourism in her state, and was on her way to Lansing, meeting with 5 legislators the day I talked to her. So she was, you know, living the dream there. So my last tip for you on building relationship, and then I'll close, is do your best to provide exclusive information to elected officials. Now, what I mean by this is you don't share confidential information that can't be put out to the public, but I know you all do lots of research. You have lots of new inventions and medical advances and so forth. You need to be very strategic in how that is dispersed. Let's make sure that our elected officials hear it from us first. Let's make sure that they know that it's exclusive, because in today's world of hyperabundant content, we know that exclusive information is extremely persuasive and extremely powerful. So and the way you do that is in your language, you know, letting people know, you know, there's 10 legislators that are really important on this issue, and you're one of the 10, and we wanted you to have this first. Or you're seeing this before this goes out to the media. Or this is, you know, confidential to our elected officials dealing with this issue and our board members, you know, that kind of thing. Okay. So you've got to let people know the information is exclusive. And I'm not saying embellish it and make it up, but there's lots of times where you do have something that's new, interesting, and you want to be the one to share that and let them know it's exclusive. That is how you build a nice relationship too. Okay, particularly with lawmakers who need that to have that edge in their public policy debates and, you know, with their colleagues. So I would just reassure you that things do change. Do not get discouraged, my friends. Things take time. You know, this ad was very real back in the day. Okay, you see so many good things in DuPont cellophane, and have the babies in the cellophane and so forth. You know, things change. That wasn't that long ago that this kind of an ad was published. Or I love this one. They're happy because they eat lard from the Lard Information Council, and they look pretty good for eating lard all the time. So not that long ago that these ads were published, and things change, my friends. So you just have to keep at it. You have to keep at it. All right. So if I have time, I'm happy to take any questions you have on that, or you know, anything. And Julie, I'll send you a very streamlined slide deck that you can share with the folks, because we won't keep all these pictures in it, but we'll definitely have this content for you. But I'm happy to answer anything you might have at the present time.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. I hope you guys took away as many tips as I did. And Brian came down and poked his head in my door while Amy was talking. He's my lobbyist on staff, Amy, and he said, "Oh, that is so true."
Good.
So if you guys, we have just a short period of time for some questions, because we do want to get to our panel and allow them an opportunity to share some things with us. So if anybody's got a question, throw it in the chat. What I'm seeing right now, Amy, in the chat are just kudos and thank yous and great tips, and all kinds of really nice compliments there. And I'm happy if you have a follow-up question after today. I'm happy to connect you with Amy, and I'm sure she'd be more than willing to answer your questions if you had something. So I'm going to give it just a second. Anybody got anything they want to pitch out there?
Who has a question? Any aha moments?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again, Amy. I really appreciate it.
Good,
You're
thank
welcome
you.
to stick around if you'd like to and hear some of the panel. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Brian in just a second. But I want to reframe. When we started this morning, this is a new experience for us doing this state legislative day. And again, while we focus primarily on the federal issues, we do understand that from time to time, state and local issues have the potential to gain momentum. We've been talking a little bit yesterday about CAFO regulations, and it's mostly concentrated in California, but we have concerns that it could spread across the country. So that's a great example. So we keep our ear to the ground and try to learn about these things. And Brian has pulled together a great panel to share some things that are going on in their particular state or their community they thought you might be interested in hearing a little bit about. So Brian, take it from here.